Please welcome to the stage the co-founder and president of the Equal Justice Society, Eva Paterson.
Hey, in the African American community, we have a tradition. When somebody speaks, we go, good afternoon, and we hope that the crowd will say good afternoon back. So, good afternoon. All right, you're all black. All right. I want to thank the people who organized this event. It's very, very important. One of the most horrible things that's happened in the past 2 months is that people who are racist and anti-Semitic have felt that they can come out of their closet and do whatever they like. Let me just tell you a few things that have happened. My organization joined 154 other organizations and sent a letter to President Trump asking him to be stronger in opposing racist and anti-Semitism. These are things that have happened in the past 2 months in our country. 4 mosques have been burned. Texas, Florida, Washington, more have been defaced. Bomb threats have been made to Jewish community centers and the Anti-Defamation League and synagogues. We've also seen the desecration of Jewish cemeteries. A Sikh American was shot outside his home in Washington State. There was an attack on a Latino man just up the road here in Daly City and on a Latina in Queens. 2 South Asian Americans have been attacked and 1 was murdered. There's been racist graffiti directed against African Americans in Stamford, Connecticut and Lake Oswego, Washington. 7 transgendered women of color have been murdered. 6 were African American, 1 was Native American. So what can we do? We have to speak out. The speaker who was a couple of people ahead of me was on the right track. I think we all need to call up our friends who are Muslims, Jews, immigrants, transgender folks and say we're with you so that they do not feel alone. This is a very difficult time for all of us, and knowing that we have each other's back is very important. Thank you. I recently came back from Kenya and was very nervous about going through customs, but I looked at the Muslims who were there and was even more frightened for them. So I went out of my way to say Assalamu alaikum, if I'm saying it the right way, to every Muslim I could see and let them know that we are not all anti-Muslim in this country. So I think it's important to do very specific things. I also was on sabbatical for 5 months and tweeted out as much information as I could to get the information out about the racist activities. But what I really want to talk about today is what our own responsibility is around racism and bias. The speaker before me talked about unconscious bias, which is also sometimes known as implicit bias. And I want us to all look within ourselves and within the tech industry to figure out what we can do to eliminate bias in this industry and in this country. My colleagues at work encouraged me to tell a story on myself, which is very embarrassing, but it's important for us to look within ourselves and not just to go, oh, it's all the Trump people who are racist, because many of us carry racially biased attitudes within our own minds and souls. In 1992, there was a hurricane in the South called Hurricane Andrew. I remember the newscaster talking about looters, and what went through my head was the image of black people. I was very embarrassed about that. I'm embarrassed to stand up and say that in front of you today, but I hope it will allow us to all look within ourselves and be honest about the bias that we have. Nelson Mandela, when he was still fighting apartheid, got on a plane and there was a black pilot. He was very nervous about the black pilot, and then he realized how much he had internalized racism himself. I'm proud to say that when I was in Kenya, I was on 5 flights and 4 of them were flown by black women. I was weeping, not from being afraid, but from being so happy. So I guess I've overcome at least some of my internalized bias. Now, in terms of the tech industry, the notion of implicit bias or unconscious bias or implicit associations, where you associate certain groups with certain attributes or lack of certain attributes, these are concepts that are very, very important, and I hope you'll take them back to your workplaces. There's a notion that blacks and Latinos don't have what it takes intellectually to fare well in the tech industry. I looked up some statistics, and I saw that 9% of the people graduating with computer science degrees are African Americans and Latinos, and 12% of those graduating from the prestigious research institutes are African Americans and Latinos. So we're plenty smart, we can do the work, we just have to get over the notion that black people are not intellectually gifted. How many of you saw the movie Hidden Figures? Go, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Because those black women put white people into space. And they did this in the 1960s. I was a young girl at that time. I was doing very well in chemistry, but girls weren't supposed to do that kind of thing back then, so I didn't take physics, didn't take algebra 2. If I had known that those women were down in the South taking care of business, I might have looked at things differently and had a different future. So what you all have to do is to remember those women, and they were coming from segregated schools. They weren't coming from Stanford or UC Berkeley, and they were absolutely brilliant. So when your people are looking to hire folks in your various institutions, you need to get over the notion that you might have that we're not educated. And if I can speak up for black women, we are apparently the most educated demographic in the country. All right, all right, all right. Another thing that you all must look at in your industry is the notion of culture fit. Now, if you're just going to have people around you who are like the people who are already there, and they're primarily white or Asian American men, then that's who you're going to keep hiring. You've got to break out of that. You've got to break out of that. I understand that Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others are giving training in implicit bias, so you can figure out what you may be doing that kind of keeps having the exclusion of African Americans and Latinos. Most of us here are not overtly racist, but we may have unconscious negative views about people of color and women. The last thing I'll say is this: these are extremely dangerous times. As Trump was running for office, I did a lot of reading about how Hitler got started, and there's so many parallels to what happened then and what's happening now. So we're aware, we're unified, we can stand up, we must stay aware, we must speak up, but we must also look within. Thank you very much.